Welcome back to the Tandem podcast. Today we have Andrew DiMartino in the house. How you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Just trying to deal with all this doing nothing stuff, especially with
Yeah,
everything going on.
yeah, it's kind of tough.
Yeah,
I'm still
and
working. I'm in my garage working,
yeah,
and got the kids running around upstairs. My wife's working from home, so I mean it's
yeah.
crazy, but it
It
kind of
seems like
is
that's
what it
just how it
is.
is lately. Because I've been out because of medical stuff, and so I've been out longer than we've had this quarantine. So it's been rough. But
Yeah.
we'll get into start talking about like kind of how you got into the drifting and talk about your car, and let's just start it with how do you get into it?
Um. So it's funny. I was watching some of the Lone Star stuff, and I watched the Dustin Miles, and he kind of explained the same thing, or was asked the same thing, and kind of went through what experience was, and mine's kind of similar. Um, Back in the day of like the RSR, like where I think um, Tanner Faust might have been driving the S2000, and I'm trying to think. There was a Supra and I think a Skyline or an S chassis. And my mom and I went to like Chicago randomly, drove up there, and we went and watched this like in a parking lot team of drift cars, and that was it. I was
Yeah,
like, this is the coolest thing.
I think that was like the D1 Grand Prix. I know it was like D1 something back in the day because I know a bunch of my buddies went and saw it.
This was probably, I'm trying to think when I started driving, because it was like shortly after I got my license, which would have been like 2003, 2003 or 4. And I went and saw that, and immediately I was just like, man, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And, you know, watching those guys was the start of it. But then, I had an MR2, and, I don't know if you've ever tried to slide one of those. That's probably one of the most terrifying things. So that didn't work out too well. Got rid of that. Uh, Kind of went through a couple front wheel drives, the Honda era that everybody has to go through, and then um, I got rid of my Civic that I had and got a SC300 that was just a car that was actually like a salvage car that like we found in a junkyard, but it was totally complete. So I drove that and ended up doing a 1J swap in it. Still an automatic. I just drove it. So, but I mean, I put a limited slip in it, and every time it rained, I was out slamming the streets, and I was kind of like pit crewing on my friend's. He had a Miata, and the first time that I went and like really helped him, work on his car was like No Star Bash when it was at Gateway Motorsports Park,
Yep.
which was a little while back now. But that was, I had just swapped my Lexus, and he went up there, um, and I helped him throughout that weekend, and that really kind of solidified like what direction I was going. Um, I had my Lexus. It's actually a buddy of mine's now, but it was just a street car that I dailied, and like I said, me and him would go slam the streets when it was wet because he had a Miata and I had a automatic 1J boat that I would slide around. But man, like it would just it felt right. And after that, the car that I currently drive popped up as a roller. Patrick Farkas um, owned it at the time, and I had followed the build for a long time. And I had actually bought two or three things off of that car because he was actually parting it out. And I kind of like looked at my street. I was like, okay, I'm just going to transition this into a full on, drift build instead of just like a a street slider or whatever you want to call it. So I started like collecting parts from him, and then he offered it to me as a roller with no engine, and like it had the kit and the coilovers and a couple arms, but that was basically the extent of it. And I was like, oh well, he's in Ohio, so I kind of threw the idea around with my wife and then talked to my dad. And, the car was changed, and that was the biggest thing. Like, okay, cool, that's already done. Well, I'll just throw my engine in it. I'll throw this transmission that I've got in it, and then we're gonna go and we're gonna go as hard as we can, right?
Yep.
Well, come to find out, my wife was pregnant, and so then I kind of like the car got like pretty heavily delayed, like between the time that I bought it, because I'm kind of a perfectionist with a lot of things, and like I kept finding little things, and like the brake lines, I didn't like how they it was just like one thing after another, and then I was like double and triple buying parts for the car. So, like a year turned into 2 years, and then like we needed to do a gender reveal, and I was like, well, I need to get this car running because I want to do the gender reveal, like with the car. That was the deal. Like as soon as we found out, I was like, well, I have to get the car going. Get the Highway Max color smoking tires, and we're gonna invite everybody we know, and I'm gonna do this big ripper in the driveway because I couldn't
Yep.
find anywhere to like. I ended up doing like a third gear ripper sitting here in the driveway, and I like set off every smoke rash of no sleep for like 2 weeks leading up to that, and it was just insane, man. Like, and that's kind of like once it was running, the car like it really like kind of relit the fire because you get a car and it's like a project and it doesn't really run, and you kind of lose steam a little bit because you start just pouring money into it hoping to get it where you want it. And as soon as it was running and I did that, I was like, I have to finish this and I have to get it to an event.
Yeah, it seems like that's
I,
usually half the battle when it comes to when you start building a car is get it running and then focus on kind of the other aspects of it. And it
yeah.
usually pans out a little bit better if you do it that way.
Yeah, and that's I'll say that I grew up. My dad it was into like hot rods and Harleys. So that's kind of what I grew up around. We built a bunch of hot rods, and everything we did was like get a car running, make it pretty later. So we would get these hot rods running, drive them for a month or two, put 5,000 miles on these hot rods just in primer or like mixed matched body panels or whatever, and just make sure that like everything was sorted, and that's kind of what was like ingrained into me when I was you're really young. So like the fact that the car was pretty was kind of nice. So it was just like, okay, cool, well, I'm gonna make everything underneath that you don't see like really sick so that I can just go wear this poor car out and not have to work on it at the track, because that's the like I
Yeah,
hate working on my.
I know the feeling.
So
So you kind of is that where you kind of picked up your fabrication skills when it came to that? And is that how it kind of transitioned, or have you always been like a fabricator that built cars?
so like I said, growing up around dad, always building hot rods and different things and bikes and whatever. I always kind of had like this like love and passion for like you know putting things together that didn't really belong. So I guess like I grew up, I didn't know that I was going to be a fabricator until like my last year of high school, and I really didn't want to be there. I would rather like be doing something with my hands. So I took welding class, and that was in '04, and I really enjoyed it. So like I was like, okay, well, I can't really afford to pay someone to do this or that. So I, like figure it out. So, in 2004, I really started, welding a lot, and then that kind of progressed. And, I just tried to do it every day and couldn't really afford to, I was like looking at cars like Forrest Wang's car, and I was like, man, I want to have gussets everywhere, and I want all this stuff to be super nice, also be like a proper car that doesn't break. So it just turned into like me taking like the hot rod aspect with dad and kind of applying it to a drift car, but like grabbing parts that don't necessarily belong together, but like, oh, I know that this fan works off of this car as a stock car, so I'm going to use that because they're cheap and I know they
Yeah.
work. So like, I, you know, yes, fabrication came from like my dad, but also like he pushed me to be a better fabricator and like wanted me to do stuff for him. So he would like while I was working for him, I guess kind of still does, have a automotive repair shop, all Japanese, and building hot rods and stuff. He really wanted me to kind of surpass his skills, so he would like send me to do things. He like, yeah, I'm gonna send you to Detroit. I want you to go learn how to work on these like sheet metal fabrication and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Went up, spent some time with Ron Fournier, and did some like stretcher, English wheel, planishing hammer, gas welding aluminum, which is the weirdest
Oh
thing I've
wow.
ever done. It's super weird, but what an art, man. Like
Yeah, it's super old school, just like the old what like
it's
filling
like
lead.
the lead,
Yeah.
dude. It's exactly right, man. You use like flux and everything. And you use this like really an interesting art. I look at all these like pro builds, and for whatever reason, like I definitely don't drive enough to drive a pro car of any caliber. But like I go to like FD and stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, this looks like it works really good. So I'm gonna try to do that like on my car because like
Yeah.
I see that it works on this pro car. So as little as I actually drive, it should work.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know if that answers the question even a little bit, but